Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I don't think any more are going to join us. It's a smaller, more select audience than I'd expected, but no less exciting for me. I'm happy to be here, and I'm really glad that you stayed to the end of the day to join me for this last session. I'm going to be speaking with you for about 20-25 minutes or something like that. And before I start, I need to make a confession. About a little over 20 years ago, I did something that I deeply regret, something that I'm pretty much ashamed of, and something that I really shouldn't be revealing in public, but there's something that overwhelming inside of me wants to share it with you today. In 1994, I retired from active service in the Royal Navy, and I signed up for a degree to study law. I was going to be a barrister, and I signed up for what was Margaret Thatcher's brainchild, Buckingham University, where you do 2-year degrees, and I was going to become a barrister at the end of it. For reasons I won't go into, I didn't graduate, and therefore I didn't practice law. I practiced law a little bit when I was a litigant in person at my wife's divorce petition against me, so I represented myself, so I dusted off my legal notebooks for that. But I'm going to try and do it again today. I'm against my better judgment, against the better judgment of my friends. I'm going to try and make a hard, fact-based legal case, I think, for happiness and how you can measure it and improve it. If you read the bio, I'm an advisor to David Cameron on the National Wellbeing Programme. So I am the UK's, or one of the UK's, I hate the word gurus, but that's what they say in cabinet, on national well-being. And there's 10 domains, and I look after one of them. I do other things as well. I work for 2 football clubs. I also work for 2 high street banks. So there's a real mixture in my portfolio. Okay, so 20 minutes is not a long time to make a case for anything. And before you all start pushing back, thinking, how can you do anything in 20 minutes? In fact, some people can do things twice in 20 minutes, but anyway, you can do a lot of things in 20 minutes, and Steve Jobs, who I used to work for Apple as well a few years ago, and Steve Jobs made one of the best commencement addresses at Stanford, and he did that in 15 minutes. John F. Kennedy encouraged the nation to reach for the stars, and he did that in just under 20 minutes. For the ladies in the room, Sheryl Sandberg wrote a very good book and made a case on TED for women leaning in, and if you've not read that book, I'd encourage you to do it. And then finally, Martin Luther King, in slightly over that time, in 21 minutes, he inspired a nation to rise up against racial inequality. So you can do quite a lot in 20 minutes. But in evolutionary terms, it's just a blip in the ocean. We've been evolving as human beings for about 2 million years. And what happened, there's something significant that happened in the 2 million years I'm referring to, in the sense that our human brains almost tripled in size, from about 1.5, so about 1 pound for our ancient ancestors, to around about 3 pounds for that lump of meatloaf that we have residing between our ears. And one thing about the human brain, it didn't just get bigger, it got more complex. And there's a part of the brain, the great big flat thing at the front, the precortex, that allows us to do something similar, something unique that a lot of our ancestors and the other animals in the kingdom cannot do, and it's actually an experience simulator. So I used to be a navigator of an aircraft carrier, HMS Ark Royal, and we never let pilots land on Ark Royal in the middle of the Atlantic without first of all putting them through a simulator to make sure they could do it right. And you can do that with your own experiences. And it's right up there, believe it or not, with opposable thumbs, standing upright, and the evolution of language. And yet very few of us do it. So I'm going to try and let you try and practice your own simulators now with, I think I've got a slide coming up, or before we do that, I might just show you this. I've always wanted to break Twitter. I've never managed to do it. But they are the hashtags and the Twitter feeds for this conference. So if you've got your iPhone and it's connected to the internet, you might want to try and let's see if we can. I think the record is something like 1.5 million in a minute. And I think it was at the Oscars with the lady, I can't remember her name. With 21 people in the room, we're not going to do that, but we could try. Okay, so here we can practice our own experience simulators here. There's 2 slides there behind me, and one of them is a couple winning the lottery, and the other one is is a person who's had a fatal, well, not fatal accident, but ends up becoming a paraplegic. You have a choice. You can experience your life in advance. Which one of those would you rather have? And I could give you some time to think about this, and I don't think you'd need very much time to actually decide which one you want. And the chances are that you would go with the one on the left. But the interesting thing is that within about 12 months, both of those people are as happy as they were before those two experiences happened. And in actual fact, statistically, you go back to your level of the normality with happiness within about 3 months of any life-changing experience. The thing is that we synthesize it. That's the whole point. We have a benchmark of happiness and we go back and forth from it. But we don't convince ourselves of doing that. And the reason why we don't go through this experience simulator. So how many of you in the room here have been, up late at night worrying about a talk you've got to give the next day, so you're getting cold sweats and you're worried about it and you don't know whether it's going to go good or bad or indifferently. And then when you end up having that presentation, pretty much like the one I'm doing now, it goes much better than you imagined it to be. But it might as well have been a disaster because you've experienced it anyway. So that's your experience simulator not normalizing itself. So you just need to train yourself that actually happiness you can learn. And it's there, and it's all within us to do that. So in terms of what people said, I don't necessarily agree with all these things. I studied psychology. I went to Harvard to study psychology, and I ended up branching out into the psychology of success. The reason I did that, I've always been fascinated with human nature and why people do certain things. I grew up in a children's home in Liverpool. I became a ward of court. My father was very cruel, and lots of fathers in the country are cruel, but mine was particularly cruel, and I ended up becoming a ward of court. And I went into a children's home at 14. And I had a lifetime then of interest of why people do certain things, and that's why I studied psychology. So these quotes here are about some of the people that I studied at the time, and I don't necessarily always agree with them, but you might have come across them before. This is what Gandhi said. And this is what Freud, which is probably the most famous of them all. Freud said, for us to be happy, we need work and love. And I can, in a way, kind of get on board with that. However, I'd have a third dimension to it and say that we need something else. We need to believe in something greater than ourselves. And for a lot of people, they'd label that spirituality. But that's a personal view, but that's what Freud said. Okay. Because work and love gives us purpose. And I could ask you all here what your purpose in life is. And I'd probably get some blank faces. And there was a seminal moment for me when I was in a shopping supermarket. It's the one with the orange bags, you know the one I mean? And I was in the queue, and there was a chap in front of me having his groceries scanned. There's no dialogue between him and the cashier. And after 2 or 3 bags of grocery scanning, she gave him back the Visa card and till receipt. To which he said, "Aren't you supposed to say thank you now?" To which he responded, "We don't have to say that anymore because it's printed on the till receipt." Now, I feel I've been put on this planet for a purpose, so her worst day was about to happen because I was going to engage in a conversation with her. So I duly did. So while she's doing the same thing with me, I started chatting to her about why she does what she does. Why she does what she does. When you ask people what do they do for a living, they'll typically tell you what's printed on their business card. So I have no title on my business card, so I want to be more than a title. Some organizations or some people will tell you how they do things. But the really clever people and the really clever organizations will tell you why they do it. And that's a question you want to ask yourself, why you do what you do, both in work and pleasure. Because when you get to the heart of that, you start getting to the heart of happiness. Because you start answering those fundamental questions. So, why does she do what she does? Our cashier lady. I kind of gave her the answer, but I hope she was grateful for it. She might be the chief executive of Sainsbury's now, I don't know. Why does she do what she does? What's her purpose in life? In time running on, I'll tell you what I said her purpose was. I said her purpose was to make sure the customer comes back. Because if that's her purpose, she probably wouldn't have said that, and I'm not discrediting her in any way. She's probably told to say that. But she can think for herself. So if you have a difference, if you really want to freak out your staff at your call center when you go in on Monday morning, ask them what their purpose is. Because they won't give you a job title. I can guarantee you that. They'll probably look at you blankly, frankly. But underneath that will be some fundamental answers, and it's worth asking it. Okay. There's four, talking about synthesizing happiness and changing how you see the world and how the world sees you. There's four faces on there, and you may not recognize them. The chap on the left is a chap called Jim Wright, one of the most powerful people in America. He was the head of the House of Representatives, and he had some shady book deal, and some upstart called Newt Gingrich outed him. And in doing so, he lost his fortune, he lost his prestige, he lost his job, and he lost his marriage. And yet, when all that happened, he said he'd never been happier. And he described his life as being glorious, which is words you'd use when you die and go to heaven, I imagine. I don't quite know. But that's what he described. The chap, the black gentleman there, number 2, he is a chap called Maurice Bickman, and he spent 37 years in a state penitentiary for a crime he didn't do. And yet, when he came out of the state penitentiary, he described his life as being glorious and wonderful and happy. And then the chap on the third one, you might recognize him. He's the chap by the surname of Lingerman. And he saw an advert in a newspaper about some burger joints that were setting up in America. And they were looking for investment. And he went to meet these two chaps who were by the name of McDonald. And they only wanted £3,000 investment for a franchise. And he went back to his brother, who was an investment banker, and he said, "You must be crazy. Nobody in America eats burgers." And then a few years later, somebody by the name of Kroc read the same advert, only this time he did stump up the $3,000, and for a while he was the richest man in America. And you probably recognize the fourth chap, that is Pete Best. And Pete Best was one of the original drummer with the Beatles. Only the Beatles sent him out on an errand one day. They went on tour and they got somebody else by the name of Ringo Starr, and Pete Best was out. Pete Best is still a session musician. And yet he describes his life as being wonderful now, and I'm glad that he wasn't in the Beatles. So my take on happiness, if you want to be happy, this is pretty much what you've got to do. It's easy, isn't it? That's the surprise. That's the surprising science of happiness. However, there is some research that you can do on to do this. But it's about synthesizing it. Often we try and chase it, and we just need to change our frame of reference. So this is a model which I developed when I was in the Royal Navy. So I was 16 years of age. I had no academic qualifications, and I wanted to become a naval officer. I wanted to be a navigator. So this model here is about seeing. If you can see what you want to do, visualize it, the chances are you will do the right things, and if you do the right things, you will get the results. And everything that you see around you, the chairs you're sitting in, the carpet we walk on, the building we're in, was imagined in somebody's mind before it was realized in the real world. And that's what you have to do. You just have to visualize it and then do the right things. So the latest bit of research I've done for the government. So I'm a quantitative researcher. In fact, I don't actually always know what I do. It depends where I'm working. When people say, "What do you do?" If I'm working for the government, I'm a quantitative researcher. When I'm working with business, I'm an international leadership consultant. And when I'm working with schools, so it's the end of the academic year now, so I do a lot of speech days. So when I go into schools, I tell the children I'm a storyteller. So I kind of have 3 roles depending what I do. So I do research for the government. So the government give me, or the Office of National Statistics give me data, and then I turn this into sound bites typically that the government can use. So some of the things leading up to the election that David Cameron was using would have been some data that me and my other colleagues on the National Wellbeing Programme would have done. So there you go. You can probably read some of these things yourself. Money doesn't necessarily buy you happiness. It kind of helps. It allows you to buy a nice yacht to sit on it and contemplate happiness, but it doesn't per se give you happiness. I don't necessarily agree with this, but on average, it's probably true. Now, bear in mind, I came from a children's home, and I'm a fairly happy chappy now. You would think I wouldn't have that. So on average, only about 10% is due to your income. Some of it is your background, your DNA, and then the rest of it is attributed to how you view the world and the world views you. After getting married, you have a huge spike, and you'll probably be happy with that. But certainly being in a relationship, a loving relationship, you'll be happier than somebody who's single statistically. Happy people center their lives around three things: family, friends, and spirituality. People who work, this is what Steve Jobs was all about, saying that you should do what you love. My daughter's just graduated from university. Something I'm trying to get her to think about now, thinking about what she wants to do and do a job that she really enjoys. Anybody accountants here? No. I've never met a happy accountant. I think the mere desire to be an accountant should really ban you for life for being one. I don't quite know. So happy people live 9 years longer than unhappy people. I'm making a case here to be happy. No negatives in this. And this is an interesting one as well, not necessarily measuring yourself against your peers. Try and live an authentic life. You can do that. You'll be happy. According to the Daily Mail, I don't know how many of you keep a journal. I write a journal. I write a journal. I used to do a journal every day, but I don't have the time to do it now, so I do it typically on a Sunday. But doing a journal can help you with your happiness because it gives you an opportunity to reflect. And reflection's a good thing. And the act of smiling. I said that even if it's a fake one. It does release those endorphins, which can kind of help you. You use less muscles anyway. Frowning is tiresome. Because it takes more effort for a start off. Okay. And then if you want to put some money on it, happy people generally earn a bit more money. So there's a case for money there if you want it. Do you know what the upper limit is when money no longer has any effect on your happiness and well-being? There is a figure.
UK 65K?
No, it's slightly less than that. The gentleman here said 65,000. It's actually 50,000 pounds, which you might think actually is quite a lot. You're all running call centres, so you're probably all over that. So stop seeking the Yankee dollar. You don't need it. Once you get to 50,000 pounds, money doesn't have any significant impact on you at all. Even the couple who won the lottery, huge spike. 12 months later, their happiness is at the same level. And the amount of research that Camelot has done, it bowls this out. Yes, huge spike. Absolutely, person who became a paraplegic, huge drop in happiness. But 12 months later, or on average 3 months, but typically 12 months, you're back to the level you were before. And yet, we all think it's the same with relationships. You know, we all think if we lose that loved one, we're all going to be depressed and unhappy forever. You momentarily, absolutely. But you'll come back to that equilibrium. Okay, this is the National Wellbeing Program, and I look after number 1, and my colleagues look after, it's another 9 of us on this, and they look after 2 to 10, so I look after number 1, personal wellbeing. And I wanted just to give you a tool to take away that simply you can measure your own happiness. The UK happiness is 7.2 currently, on average, out of 10. It's not out of 100, by the way. Any of you thinking, crikey, we're all depressed? Yeah. It was 6.7 when the coalition came into power, so it's gone up a little bit since then. And David Cameron's happiness is just nudging 11 out of 10 at the moment. He was pretty happy 2 days after the election when all his combatants all resigned. He wasn't quite expecting that. Anyway, here are the 10 measures for what makes up the happiness index, and I put a wheel here on the left, so you can do this in the comfort of your own home. You can just take each one of those, give yourself a score out of 0 to 10. If you use this wheel, the inner circle is 0 and the outer one is 10. And then give yourself a score on each one of those based on where you are now, your current, whatever age you are now. You could also actually put another score on it and think where you should be. So for example, if your partner is not pulling his or her weight, and you think your relationship is a 4, but it should be an 8. You've got a bit of a gap analysis there that you can do something about it. If you do think your partner's only a 4, be careful how you might share this information, because you might end up down that dodgy path of litigation. So you don't want to do that. But it'll give you a snapshot in time, and it's quite useful just to It's a perception, admittedly, but it's useful. And if you do it periodically, you can then have an agony of choice which one you want to concentrate over the next period of your life, which is typically, I do this every 3 months, incidentally. 3 months is roughly 100 days. You can tell I'm not an accountant, I'm nowhere near 100 days, but anyway, in my mind it's around about 100 days. And I pick one of these and try and make 1% increment every day, so at the end of 3 months I've typically achieved 100% of it. So it kind of works and it's useful. Okay. I want to finish up very briefly because I want to give you a tool that you can take away, and you're all in call centers, yes? When I left the Navy, the first job I had, I was the relationship marketing manager for what was TSB. And TSB was the first high street bank to set up a call center following in the footsteps of First Direct. So I went down to Newport and helped set up that call center, partly because I was an Arabic interpreter in a former life in GCHQ, and we used a communication system there called Converse. And they had the same system in Newport, and I was recruited to help them set up that. And I wish I had this tool at my disposal then when we were recruiting, people into the call center. This is just simply what we do as a company. But the tool I want to give you, this is our leadership development program. And on the top one there, number 1, is what the Times Literary Supplement described it as. But I want you to look at number 9, because it comes with an assessment using the Berkman method. And I wish I had this 20 years ago when I set up TSP Phone Bank. I discovered it when I was in Harvard. It's an American system, and it is by far the best behavioral analysis tool that I've ever come across, because it measures behavior, and it measures not only your socialized behavior, how people see you, which is what we see each other, but it also assesses your internal needs and the behavior that is not seen by other people. Now imagine if you had that in a call center. You could then recruit to the ideal operator that you are looking for, because you know what their fundamental needs were. It measures on these behaviors. So usual behavior, underlying needs, and stress behavior. So for example, I'll give you, well, the next slide actually gives an example of it. You see here there's 2 graphs. One says esteem and the other one says acceptance. In Berkman terms, esteem is about how you deal with individuals, and acceptance is how you deal with people on a group level. So on the esteem component, that's how you deal on a one-to-one basis. Now I might be giving you the impression that I'm confident, I'm fairly to the point, business-like, but I can tell you now my internal needs are nowhere near that. I am polar opposites to what the impression I may give you. You try and manage that in a call center. You don't know. Unless you can see I have a window into my soul, you will never know that. But imagine if you did. Imagine if you know that my needs, so how I might come across to you is different how I want to be treated by you and how I want to be communicated to. So I need time, I need people to spend time listening to me and explaining things to me. But I don't give that impression. So you can actually recruit based on the needs that you're looking for. You take your ideal operator, whoever that is, you probably know what that is in a call center, and you can design, you can assess every candidate against this, and you can get the right people. I read a statistic once, I don't know what it is for the UK, but I read in America that the turnover of staff in call centers is quite high, about 40%. I don't know what it is in the UK. I do quite a lot of work in America, but I read that statistic. Anyway, so I've mentioned that. If you want to see my Berkman report, I'll send it to you. On the proviso that you don't share it around, because it's a psychological profiling tool, but I'll share it with you. I did it 10 years ago when I was in Harvard, and it is still the same today as it was 10 years ago. It never changes. Your internal needs never changes. Your socialized behavior can, because we adapt to the world around us, but my fundamental needs will never change. They're pretty much set. Okay. I wanted to finish with some psychological books. I write a lot of blogs. I do quite a lot of writing for a living. I wrote to you all before you came. How many of you got my little email? Nobody opened it. Fair enough. I was told 75 of you were coming. I wrote to 75 of you saying how much I was looking forward to, and none of you read it. Anyway, that's nice. By the way, I'm quite emotional, so inside I'm breaking apart. Anyway, I write a series of articles, and I wanted to give you a set of books. I read a book a week. I read 50 books a year, and at the end of the year, to my clients, I tell them what 10 books they should read in the coming year based on what I've just read. These are books I've read recently. But they're all pretty good books if you want to understand the science and the art and the profession of happiness and leadership as well. So I would encourage you. Some of them you may have read. Malcolm Gladwell is on there twice because I'm a particular fan of his. I've probably overrun slightly, and for that I'm very sorry, because I don't wear a watch. Not yet anyway. I might get an Apple Watch, but I don't wear a watch. I have no idea what time it is. You didn't stop me, so
It's 10-2.
Oh, cool. Marvelous. Thank you very much.
Choose the ball.
Oh, right, okay. Anyway, I've finished. If you want to engage with us as a company, that's where we are. We're based in Bristol, and we have offices in London and New York. That's it. Are we all happy?